Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about data tables and storing information and then accessing that information after you're finished. So the first thing we want to do is click on this. We're in our future value calculator. I guess the first thing we want to do is probably just delete this payment at the beginning or the end. Let's just not even really worry about that, and we'll just move calculate up. And what we'll do is we'll have a repeating panel come down here, and as we calculate it, it will store this calculation plus the answer, which is in the output, into a repeating panel over and over and over again, where we can either delete it or update it and store the information, so we can kind of see different calculations each time. So the first thing we want to do is find a place to actually store that. So if we click on services, we want to click on data tables, and that's going to open up the data table, and here we're going to add a table. So our table, will create a new table, and the table name will be called something like interest rate. Let's just call it future amount. Very, keep it very easy. All right, and let's make some new columns. In the first column, let's just keep all of these as text columns. Okay, so the first column is going to be number of periods. The next column is going to be starting amount. The next column will be interest rate, and then the next column will be periodic deposit. That should work. Okay, so we'll have those four, and what we'll do is we'll grab those four every time that we want to load it up, and we'll do that calculation on it. Okay, and that should work. So we will go from there, and I guess the first thing we need to do is probably just load this up with some stuff, right? So in our example, if we click back over to our home form, it lists our example. It says $100 a month for 3 years, 2,000 in savings, and you put 100 in. Okay, interest rate of 5 years. So if we go over here, interest rate is 0.05. The deposit amount is $100 a month. Starting amount, I think, was, let's go back and look, you already have 2,000 in savings. So let's go click on that and say starting amount is 2,000. And then the number of periods is, one last thing, let's look, 3 years. Okay, so click on data tables and just put 3. Okay, so we want to load, if that's our first one, we want to load that into our form. So we come over here, and now we're going to put in our form. This output label, you can probably just delete that for now, and then just add our repeating table. Now, of all these components, we want this one here, the one that it's actually called a repeating panel. Okay, so we come over here and we just drop it right below, and then we want to name it. So we're going to come over here and let's just call that RP, repeating panel, future value. Okay, so once we click on it, it's going to ask us what table do we want to display. Well, we want the future amount table. We just created it. You can always change this later by setting it in the items property, but for right now, we just said now to do that. Okay, so we want to grab 4 text boxes and put it down here. Okay, so we'll just come over here to the text box and we'll drop the first one in, and then we'll add another text box, and then a third text box, and then a 4th text box, and then a 5th text box. Not a text box, let's just do a label. So we'll put a label there, and that will be the actual answer. And then we'll do a button. It's kind of a cool button. And then we'll do one more button. All right. So we have all of our items here. Well, let's look at our button. Again, we like to change it to the primary role, and let's give it an icon of calculator. Okay, with no text, so nice and small. And then do this one over here again, primary color, and let's change that to a trash can for delete with no, and then let's change the color of that to red. Looks kind of cool. Okay, and let's name those. So this one here is BTN update, and this one is BTN delete, button delete. Now let's name each of these text boxes. This first text box is text box number of periods. Okay, notice I'm not naming them the same here. Up here I used it TB at the end, and down here we're starting it with TB. Okay, if I don't do it like that, it's going to throw an error saying we can't have both of them on there. The next one is TB for text box starting amount. The next one is TB interest rate. The next one is TB deposit payment. And then the last one is label total. All right. Okay, so that is, for now, that's how you set up your data table, and that's how you set up this. So all we want to do now is bind those two together. So if I click this first one, number of periods, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to bind, and we called it, let's just take a look and see our data table. We called it number of periods. Okay, so number of periods, starting amount. Let me just take a screenshot of that so I'll know when I go back. So come over here, and I like to give this a name too. So I'm just gonna rename this to future grid. Give it a little bit so we know it's the repeating panel. If I click on this one here and go to bindings, the first binding is going to be number of periods. The second binding is going to be starting amount. The third binding is going to be interest rate. And the fourth binding is going to be deposit, periodic deposit. Okay. At this point, if I run it, it should have popped up with something, but it didn't. So what am I doing wrong? So if I think about it for just a second and I go to the code, you got to remember when you first start, up here is your initialization. Okay, so in my initialization, I want to actually load that repeating panel. So let's take a look and see what that code looks like. So instead of printing out hello world, why don't we do self.repeating panel future value dot items. So set the items in that future panel equal to, and now let's get the stuff out of that data table. So app table future amount, and let's do a search. And for right now, that right there is enough. Okay, I could do a couple other things, like I could say something like tables dot order by, and maybe we can do order by amount. So or interest rate. So why don't we do that? Let's do an order by interest rate. Okay, and see what that looks like. So if I run it now, it's going to run and says cannot search table from client code, permission denied. Oh, it always gives me the permission denied. Let's go fix that real quick. If I go back to data tables, what it's saying is this form is only accessible through server modules. And what that means is, let's actually get rid of this so you could see. you can make a server code and it will actually run on the server. These forms and things are actually run on or in the web browser. So they're local, which means people can manipulate them, which makes them less secure. So not advisable to do, but for the purposes of this, we don't need to write a server module for this. Instead, let's just set the form equal to edit. So here, if we set it equal to edit, now when we go to run it, it should spinny thing, and it should bring in these things. Now, our problem is we don't necessarily know what these are, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense what these are. So we might need to do one of two things. We could probably just say, put labels in front of them so you'll know that this one is the number of periods, the starting amount, interest rate, and like payment every single month. Okay, so we could try that. But for now, that's how that works. Now this doesn't work and this doesn't work. We actually haven't programmed those yet. But if we go back over to program those, we can go to design, and then if you open this up and you double click it, it will create that event for it. And then if you double click this one, it'll create that event for it. And then I can actually do some programming in here to say delete. So if I wanted to say delete the item, is actually it's a pretty easy one. All you have to do to delete the item, it's just something like self.item.delete. Okay, and the only other thing you'd want to do is remove it. So self.remove from parent, and what that does is it will go in and it will actually remove this row. After you hit the delete button, it will delete it out of the table, and then it'll remove it from the repeating panel. So if I run this and I hit delete, like so, boom, it actually deletes it out of it, got rid of the whole thing. If I come back over, it is no longer in that data table. Okay, so that's the delete one. The other one was the update one, and the update one is a little bit more tricky, and we'll probably make our own video to do this update one. But for now, that's the delete one. And then I guess we still need to do one for this calculate button. So instead of just doing this calculation, at the end of the day, instead of outputting it down here, we'll want to send to the data table, load up the data table, and then yeah, so that's what we'll end up doing. So we'll want to load up that data table. So that will be the next video. But for right now, in this video, we talked about data tables and we talked about building that repeating panel. Okay. Notice when you put in the repeating panel here, it created this other page, this kind of sub page here. Okay. And then we drag the stuff over. I will probably want to put in some labels, like this first label is for text would be, let's just keep it simple, number of periods. Okay. And then let's add another one. And in this one, we'll call it starting $. And then let's do another one. Here will be interest rate. And let's add a little percent sign. And then let's put this one here. We need to drag interest rate over. There we go. And then this one is going to be, let's just say deposit. Okay. And then on this last one, we can actually put the total in. So when I run it, there isn't anything in here yet. But if I go back to the data table and add something here, which I think was like 3, let's go 2,000 here, interest rate of 0.05, and $100 a month. Okay, and then when I run it, it's going to give you just a little bit better idea here. So let me delete that one out and see if that fixes it. Click stop. Yep, so it looks like we're good. All right, next video I will make one on how to do the calculate button on the add button, and then I'll also tell you how to do the update button, and we'll go to that point.